Good morning. Welcome to Tiny House Fest Vermont. First year. Woo! I'm Erin Miley O'Keefe, and this is Lisa Kuhneman, and we also have another cohort, Betsy Hall, who's around. And I guess it was maybe 5 months ago, we said, I was holding little tiny house talks in my house, and Betsy said, we should do a festival. And I was like, I don't know, I'm building a tiny house this year. That's like, seems kind of crazy. And then she said it again. And then the third time she said it, I was like, okay, let's do it. And here we are. So thanks for turning out. Lisa wanted me to remind you about is on the Indiegogo site, we're crowdfunding this festival. A house that myself and many generous hands, including my husband, in the last 6 days, we built the paper boat house, which is the SIP house over there. And that's going to be done this fall. And if you want to stay in it in May of next year, you can go on the Indiegogo site. You know more about that. You want to say a little bit about that?
Sure. There are one-night opportunities and two-night opportunities to stay in Miley House. There are some images that if you haven't already gone over, and I think they're posted over there as well, you can take a look at what the finished house is going to look like. I don't think you've seen anything else out there like it. If you've seen a lot of tiny houses, this one's definitely unique. So, you know, it's a great opportunity because once Erin and Kevin move in, I think that opportunity will be gone. So thanks for coming and making it what it is. Yeah.
So, yeah, and like Lisa said, this festival is really about integrating into downtown Brattleboro. So we're really encouraging also the restaurants throughout Brattleboro have Tiny Bites menus, which is why we don't have food vendors here. So please, if you're not from Brattleboro or you are from Brattleboro, take a walk through the town and support our local businesses.
That's part of what makes it great. We do have sponsors that are helping. Being the first year, you know, anything that starts up the first time, people want to see a track record, and then they get on board. So we do have a few brave sponsors I'd like to mention. Manny's TV and Appliance has been very generous. We really, not only with financial support, but just a fantastic online cheerleading campaign. So we appreciate that very much. We have sponsorship from Chroma Tech up in Bellows Falls and from Recycle Away. They have containers for recycling. Usually see them in public places and schools, public buildings. And they're centered right here in Brattleboro. We have a list of partners, local partners, that is, every time I look at it, I can't believe it. Really want to shout out to the Latches Hotel. Their support has been incredible. They knew what we were after when we said we wanted to be in this space. They understood what we were trying to do in the way of imagining how our spaces could be used. And they got on board and were very supportive. Thank you. We're very encouraged. And so our next panel is called Wastewater Solutions. We have Susan McMahon from the Windham Regional Commission, and Kim Nace and Abe Noe-Hayes from Rich Earth Institute. I don't think you could have a better group of people up here to talk about wastewater and think about solutions for, not just for living in tiny houses, but for thinking in general about the future and wastewater issues. So thanks so much. One other thing, if you do get a moment, if you walk down the street this way and you take a right, on the right, there's the Latches Hotel. They have a gallery space, and there's a presentation by the Green Economy Hub. Sorry, I didn't sleep much last night. They're now called the Ecovation Hub. They have a new name, so let's just do it that way. Ecovation Hub. And it's a beautiful video. It does a really good job of informing about a complex relationship that's coming together to define and emerge a green building economic development opportunity here that's pretty incredible. So if you're interested in that, in economic development in this area and green building, it's a real must. You have to stop by and see it. It'll only take a few minutes. And a kids maker station at the River Gallery School Gallery. Check it out. They're making really great tiny, tiny houses. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll just start by introducing ourselves so you know who's up here in front of you. I'm Abe Noe-Hayes. I live in Putney, and I've been involved for over a decade with composting toilets and building, designing, consulting on those. And then in the last 5 years, I've been working with Kim Nace on the Rich Earth Institute, which is the urine project you may have heard about if you are from around here, and you may have participated in if you've used the urine harvesting portable toilets down there. So that's me.
Okay. Yes, and I just want to mention that in Brattleboro area we have over 100 volunteers who regularly collect their urine and bring it to our depot, which we then transport with our partners at the Best Septic Company and take it to local farms here where we are fertilizing hay. We're averaging about 5,000 gallons of urine recycled a year, and we're just poised now to expand with a new large grant from the National Science Foundation. So we're really pleased about that. And today, if you have the urge and need to go, we have 4 special portable toilets over there. One is a sawdust portable toilet for poop and pee, and there are 3 urine collecting toilets. So you can donate and know that your urine is going to a good cause. So.
Hi, I'm Susan McMahon. I'm the Associate Director at Windham Regional Commission, and I live in Putney. My specialty at the Regional Commission is community development work, so as you can imagine, I run into this issue quite a bit. So we can talk about some of those issues. So actually, I wanted to clarify today that when you think about tiny houses, you can think about what you see a lot around here are the wheels in the movable tiny houses, but then there's also the small permanent houses. So when we start talking about wastewater solutions, and I'm going to have Abe start first, they kind of break into the mobile home issue versus the permanent one. So why don't we start with something that's actually a little bit more solvable. Okay.
Okay, so I have brought as a prop a tiny toilet. That's the entire system that would go inside of a tiny house, and this is something which some of you may be familiar with the idea of the Humanure Handbook and Humanure toilets. Can I just see a show of hands of whoever knows what I'm talking about? A sawdust toilet or a Humanure toilet? That's a lot of people. Okay, great. So the principle is it's a form of composting toilet. And the idea is that the collection happens in the commode, and then the composting happens somewhere else. And then this toilet here is a urine diverting toilet, and that may be something that's a little bit newer an idea. Can I get a show of hands again, whoever has heard of urine diversion in terms of toilets? This is an unusual crowd. So this toilet has urine diversion, and I wanted to bring it as an example because I think for a tiny house it really makes a ton of sense to do a urine diverting dry toilet as a toilet solution. It doesn't address your gray water, but it does address your toilet water, which is one of the more difficult sorts of materials to handle if you've mixed it with water. So this is a toilet where you've got, I'll tip it up so you all can see it. Let's see. Yeah, thank you, Kim. So this one actually, let me just take a step back and say, so what's in here is there's a bucket for solid wastes, and it slides out here from the side, and then if you tip it up, Kim, you can see there's this, the whole thing up. The toilet bowl area is divided into a urine basin in the front with its own drain, and then a chute in the back that leads down to this bucket container. And then there's a big black hose that comes out of it, and you can plumb to a urine storage container. So it's a method for getting pee and poop stored separately, and then when this container is full, it can be composted or taken to a facility such as we're working on here, where it's composted for you. And so this is a toilet which it sort of is, this whole system and idea of collection and composting doesn't fit super well in regulations right now. And no, I mean, I'm not saying like that's not a dig or saying it's not permitted in regulations, as much as it's just not clearly defined in regulations. And if your building is a portable building, if it's a mobile home essentially, those are vehicles which typically have a storage toilet of some sort, and you pump it out. They typically have a flush toilet, and then you pump that out at a dump station. If you have a tiny house and you've got it on a plot of land for a while, of course you're not going to be running your house back and forth. So that's where this system really fits in nicely, in that it's you can take the material from the toilet and then bring it to whatever facility that you have available to you for disposal, or as we move forward, I'd like to see more and more beneficial reuse. And if you're in the Brattleboro area, of course, you can work with us or with, and we're the Rich Earth Institute, or with Best Septic Company to come and actually collect these materials and compost the solids and bring the liquid, the urine, to our treatment facility for pasteurization and reuse. So, and there's also, I've forgotten the name, but there's a woman who has contacted with us about providing, are you in the audience? Yes, you are. Can you stand up and say your name so everyone can see you? Rebecca Owens, if you didn't catch that. And she's working on providing services to tiny home owners, including pickup of human waste for beneficial reuse. So to provide that as something that you don't have to do yourself. So I kind of want to hand this off to Kim, I think.
I want to ask you to answer this question, but I think it's important to realize that when you separate the urine and the feces in a composting toilet, you're working with two different substances, and it actually helps for health reasons to separate them, and because the feces then desiccates and dries more quickly. In developing countries, they are using this method to prevent the spread of disease, and it's really a great important thing to do. So just to understand part of that process. Just one thing. Did you want to say anything about that?
I did also want to mention one other critical feature of any composting or urine separating or dry toilet you might use in a tiny house is this ventilation fan on the back. And there are sawdust bucket toilets that don't have the ventilation fan. And if you read the Human Air Handbook, it says just put wood shavings on top. That'll cover the smell. You won't smell anything. And maybe you won't smell anything if your nose isn't very strong. But if you're in a small house and you've got a sensitive nose, in my opinion, you will. And so that's why I think it's really important to have one of these ventilation fans. It draws air down through the toilet seat opening, through the container, and then out through a vent to outdoors. And so that is what keeps this odorless in a tiny house or any house. And as Kim can attest, and as I grew up with a composting toilet, if you have that negative pressure, that constant flow of ventilation into the toilet and out, it actually smells less than a flush toilet, because your ventilation fan, your exhaust fan for the bathroom is essentially at the toilet seat. So you use it, and as soon as you finish using it, the odor is already gone. It is taken away as you use it. And that's really a nice feature in a small space, and a nice feature really for any toilet. I kind of am annoyed with that with flush toilets now, because I've been working with composting toilets so long. I've gotten used to that aesthetic benefit. Okay. Yeah, I did want to say a couple things about regulation and then hand it off to Susan to talk about what if your home is actually nailed to the ground. But with these small portable composting toilets, there is an interesting regulation development that's coming through the Uniform Plumbing Code, which is it's the plumbing code that's used by most states in this country. Vermont doesn't. Vermont uses the International Plumbing Code, but the Uniform Plumbing Code is coming out with a green supplement, which are optional codes you can follow. You don't have to, but they're part of the code in that you're allowed to use them. And one of those codes specifically permits urine diverting dry composting toilets that have small containers like this that are removed and composted elsewhere. So this is a design which has gone from really a renegade design when Joe Jenkins came out with the Human Air Handbook to now it's actually going to be part of the plumbing code that covers most jurisdictions in the United States. Now what you can do with that compost and how you can compost it may vary from state to state, but this actual design is something that's going to be permitted in any residential building in most jurisdictions in the U.S. within about a year is when that code is scheduled to come out. So partly I like to, even though we're talking partly today about what are the rules that exist now and how can you or can't you fit in them, I like to look at designs that make a lot of sense practically. Like this design works, it protects human health, it protects environmental health. It's not allowed in all circumstances, but it's going to be allowed in more of them once this new code comes out.
So where kind of our work and their work begins to kind of overlap is we've been spending some time, we really struggle in this region with our historic villages, which is somewhat like a tiny house. Our housing in our villages are on a small plot of land, and with the way the rules changed, or even before the rules changed, you basically had your septic system and your water system overlapping. And now with the rules, you have to have a replacement leach field, and it's pretty land consumptive. So we're very interested in figuring out a way to take their approach and apply it on kind of a decentralized system for a small village instead of going to the very expensive sewer system. So just wanted to point out that we too are struggling with when you're dealing with a small plot of land, because the traditional rules really, you do need to have a larger parcel to have, and in Vermont, and I can only speak to Vermont regulations, and I brought about 10 sheets, but I can also show you where to find this. If you are going to build new or even add on, you are going to need to get a wastewater permit. And in the state of Vermont, you need to work with the state. The state has the approval over your permit. Now, there are alternative systems, but you really need to work with a registered engineer or a registered wastewater, I don't know, the specialist, and they will walk you through there. I brought today Wastewater Solutions for Vermont Communities. This was written in 2008. Shows alternative systems, but you can work with the state to get alternative systems approved. You're working with them, right? Yeah, it's a process. So right now the traditional approach is pretty land consumptive. So I think it's. I guess when they name this Wastewater Solutions, there's more questions we have than answers right now. And that's what's really beautiful about the work that they're doing. It makes us a more simplified approach to a complicated, expensive solution. So I'm sorry, sorry to say that I can't give you all the answers today. Did you want to talk?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things I want to say is that we are working in Vermont, and we are permitted as a research and demonstration institute, and we have a mobile urine pasteurizing unit. So we are legally able to take the urine that we collect and sanitize it and apply it to hayfields here. So we've done this pioneering of the regulation here in Vermont. Vermont's a small state with a small population and a small number of regulators who we have been able to work with very easily. That has been, I think, the reason why we've been able to take off with this project. But we are available to regulators in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, all around New England, actually any state in the country, to share with them the process we've used with our regulators and the permitting that we have used. So the Rich Earth Institute would like to very much be in the business of replicating what we've already established here. The one thing I wanted to also mention about urine reuse, and you can find this on our website, is that the World Health Organization has guidelines that are available for anybody for the reuse of the informal reuse of urine, and so that's an important thing to know. It's been studied, and they have guidelines that you can follow if you do collect and want to reuse your own urine. And I think we would maybe like to open it up for questions, because I think probably you know what you want to know from us, and we don't know that as much. So go ahead. Ishana, do you want to start?
Thank you. You mentioned that the International Plumbing Code is different than the Uniform Plumbing Code, that Vermont uses the International Plumbing Code. I'm curious as to what Vermont says about composting toilets, when they're allowed, and what kind of toilets, and as part of the International Plumbing Code or separate.
I have some experience with that. Do you as well? No. Okay. So the projects I've been involved with with residences that are on permanent foundations in irregular buildings are that if you have a wastewater system that meets the design flow, the expected wastewater flow of the building, then you can also have a composting toilet without any regulatory oversight. If you want to have a wastewater system that is too small to serve the standard design flow of the building that would normally be calculated, you can reduce that flow by a certain percentage. It's somewhere around 25%, not very much. Massachusetts gives you 50% reduction by having composting toilets, but then you need to have an engineered approval of that composting toilet to show that it is an adequate toilet. If you have a tiny home or a portable anything, my understanding is that at that point you are not required to have a wastewater system because it's not a permanent structure. And so if you have a toilet, you're not allowed to discharge to the ground or to the environment. It has to be contained. But if you contain it, then it's a toilet like you would have on an RV, and of course you don't need a permit for that. Does that answer the question?
That's great, thank you. Now, for the range of composting methods in a portable home, let's say, what are the acceptable ranges? Or for a home where it's supplementary? Like, there's so many different ways to compost human waste.
Yeah, I don't think that's really spelled out clearly, to my knowledge. And the question was, what composting methods are permitted if you do have a composter in a home or in a mobile vehicle? And my answer was I don't think it's clearly defined, and I don't think there's really a lot of oversight of that either. So I don't think that it's something that regulators have gotten closely involved with.
Oh, hi, thanks. Yeah, speaking to the range of composting toilets, I've been doing vermiculture for many years, for decades, with kitchen waste and all of that kind of stuff. And more recently, I've actually tried introducing human manure into the vermiculture mix. And instead of sawdust, I'll use soil, basically just topsoil, and of course doing the urine diverters. And the worms have not yet given me any negative feedback from that. I'm not using them full time for this kind of compost. I'm just kind of introducing them to it. I'm wondering if you have any experience with using vermiculture for... I'm asking, are you one person? I am one person, yeah, single person household. So I'm just wondering if you have any experience or feedback as far as using vermiculture for human manure.
I've seen worms thriving on composting toilets. Some toilets, if it gets too dry or too much urine and ammonia, then it can kill them off. But they definitely consume manure of any type. That also reminds me. I want to reiterate something Kim was alluding to about pathogens in human waste, and they're almost entirely in the fecal fraction of the waste. The urine, even in emergency situations, is sometimes used in place of clean water for things like emergency medical care and wound cleaning or cleaning instruments. So it's night and day between those two materials, which is another reason that source separation of urine and feces at the toilet makes a lot of sense. Because another thing we haven't mentioned about urine that drives our work is that it contains about 3/4 of the fertilizer value of human waste is actually in the urine, which you wouldn't expect based on common sense, but actually is the case, that almost all the pathogens are in the feces, and almost all of the fertilizer value is in the urine. I guess probably take another question now.
Here, and then we'll work our way over that way.
So two quick things, because I live in Massachusetts, so I'm glad you touched on that. It wasn't that far of a drive to get up here. I'm looking at more of the permanent setup, like get some land and have perhaps a small cabin. It's a little bigger than a tiny home, but is there because I know with wastewater, there's land, you have to have the septic, a leach field. If you're doing composting, it's just my wife and I, we don't have any children. Do you have to have a set amount of land, do you know off of, or if you wanted to use a piece of your own land where you would take the sawdust and compost and set it off on one side to just dry out, break down, and let the earth get to it?
I would suggest that you would need to contact your Mass DEP to find out what the regulations, it may be town by town in Massachusetts. We used to be, so we used to be town by town in Vermont, but back in 2007 they made it a state regulation. So, yes.
Okay, and then just the second question was, when you mentioned urine pasteurization, I'm assuming that's the traditional pasteurization method. You are boiling the urine to a certain temperature to eliminate pathogens, and it leaves behind just the water and the chemical components?
I have an answer for your first question also, but to hit the second one, the pasteurization we do is 80 degrees Celsius, which is about 179 Fahrenheit, for just a few minutes, about two minutes. And it is like pasteurization of milk. You bring it to a temperature, kill the pathogens, and bring it back down again. We do that because it's a community scale project. The World Health Organization's guidelines say that if it's actually a home scale, using it in your own grounds, then there's no need for treatment, because the greater risk is living with people in your home and contacting them on a daily basis. The urine carries so little that's not a risk if you're actually around the people that have been using the toilet. But to answer your other question about Massachusetts, like Kim and Susan were saying, it is town by town, and I could put you in touch with a guy, Ben Goldberg, who I'll give you my card too, and he's worked with a lot of people in Massachusetts installing composting toilets. You can build your septic system 50% the standard size if you have a composting toilet, and you typically don't go through the DEP, you go through your local Board of Health, which can be a much simpler process if they're sympathetic, or not simple at all if they're not.
Or they're probably willing to look at you if you just say, I want to do this. They're
Right.
might be like, I don't know.
Yeah, that comment was, if you come prepared and do your homework, then you're more likely to have success, which is definitely true. And Ben can help you get that ready if you want to go that route. I also want to invite people to come up and look at this toilet. This is my design. There are also similar toilets that are manufactured out of plastic that do the same thing. Joe Jenkins sells a similar one off his website. And so there are some options, but you can have a closer look if you want, and I'll bring it out there afterward.
Go ahead.
How long do you have to run the fan?
The question was, how long do you have to run the fan? And the answer is, the fan just runs. It takes about 2 watts of power, and it runs constantly. You can turn it off without affecting the system, but then you might have some odors coming out of it depending on how full the container is and that sort of thing. But the fan is supposed to run all the time.
And the solar panel would do it.
Yeah, and Kim just said a solar panel and a tiny battery is enough to supply that kind of power. We have a booth. I'll bring this to the booth afterward. The Rich Earth Institute booth. By the toilets.
Do you want to have a question? Do you have a question?
My question has to do with the water that comes from the sink or washer machines.
There you are.
Sorry. Hello, I live in New Hampshire, and actually we went down to the planning board in Winchester, and they were all for composting toilets. There wouldn't be a problem at all. They even gave us a website that had the regulations. They said, just follow these regulations and it's okay. And we're looking to build a tiny house there. But I was interested, it just never occurred to me. I thought, oh, wait a minute, what about the rest of the water, not just the water that comes from the toilet?
So in New Hampshire, every state is different, and in New Hampshire, the rule about a wastewater system is that if you have pressurized water delivered to the house, so you have a well and a pump, then you need to have a wastewater system, a septic system, that kind of thing. If you do not, if you bring water to the house or have a hand pump or something like that, then they figure you'll use little enough water, because you're doing that work of transporting it yourself, that you can just have a mini dry well. So that's where it breaks out. If you have pressurized water to the house, even if you have a composting toilet, you also need to have a septic system. But if you bring your own water, then you don't.
I just want to say that we recently went down and talked to the planning board, and the man told us we didn't have to, and we have running water to the house.
Okay.
He said a composting toilet. He gave us a website that had regulations, so things maybe are changing, and we were glad to hear about that. But what do you do with water, even in Vermont or whatever, that comes from the sink, if you're in a mobile home, with the gray water?
Right.
That comes from...
First, I want to say I'm really interested in what you just said. Would you come up afterward, and I can give you my card, and hopefully we can
be glad to
hear about your... Thank you very much. Do you have anything about the gray water?
I'd like to just say something about regulation in general. We work with a group out of Portland, Oregon called Recode, and they're working with regulation. You know, when you think about our entire systems that we live under generally here, there's been a whole years and years of regulation that's been developed. And now what we're trying to do is create new infrastructures, new kinds of things. And we're sort of entrenched in a system, and we have to pioneer and break open those doors and help people write new regulations and learn about new regulations. So the Rich Earth Institute has had a very much of a front-loading methodology to do that. We reach out to our stakeholders and our regulators, and we do an entire educational piece before we even start to ask them if we can do this and if we can do that. So that's something that we really recommend, and you need to find out in your own state who is the decision maker, and then you need to teach them first about what you're planning to do and to build some positive energy around making this something different happen. All over the country, the regulations are complicated and confusing, and people are just cataloging what's going on state by state so that we can make these innovations possible.
So I was just looking at my wastewater solutions for Vermont communities, and this was written in 2008, so I hesitate to say that this is the current, but it says regarding gray water systems is what you're referring to. It says that in Vermont, gray water systems need to have a storage tank and a dispersal field, but the dispersal field can be 25% smaller than it would be if it was receiving toilet waste. So you still need to have some sort of system in place, but that's 2008 and when this was written, so I would hesitate to say that that's the current, but it could be. It is.
The last I heard is that that still is the same regulation. And what you said, a holding tank and a dispersal field, means a septic system, a septic tank and a leach field. So you just get a 25% discount on the leach field size. So really that's a pretty small portion of the cost of the system. So we don't really have regulations that incentivize or reward or even really make that composting toilet solution a very practical one if you are required to put in a septic system. So really with a tiny house, I think that the real strength is that different classification of not being a permanent building but being a mobile unit, because then those regs don't apply at all. Foyer, I'll bring the toilet with me, and anyone can come with questions. Thank you.